Next month, the Canadian government will apologize for turning away the ocean liner, the MS St. Louis, and the Jewish refugees aboard who were fleeing Nazi Germany. This is not, of course, the first time any government of Canada has issued such a mea culpa, and it probably will not be the last. Joining us now on how effective it is for Canada to say we're sorry, we welcome Kelly LaRocca. She is chief of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation. John Moskowitz, Rabbi Emeritus at Holy Blossom Temple and the author of Evolution of an Unorthodox Rabbi. Rhoda Hassman, Professor Emeritus in the Department of Political Science at Wilfrid Laurier University. Ronaldo Walcott, Director of the Women and Gender Studies Institute at U of T and Associate Professor in Social Justice Education at OISE, the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education. And Jonathan Kay, Senior Editor at the online platform Quillette.com. And it's good to have all of you around our table tonight for a timely discussion here on TVO about the nature of saying sorry. Just to set the table for the discussion, here are some of the apologies offered by various governments of Canada over the years. And we'll go back to 1988, 30 years ago, when Brian Mulroney, then the Prime Minister, apologized for the internment of Japanese Canadians during World War II. In 2001, there was the execution of 23 Canadian soldiers during the First World War that was apologized for. In 2006, it was Prime Minister Stephen Harper who apologized for the implementation of the so-called Chinese head tax. In 2008, PM Harper also did the Canada Residential Schools apology. In 2016, it was the current Prime Minister apologizing for the 1914 incident on the Komagata Maru. Citizens aboard a ship from South Asia turned away, many eventually dying upon returning to India. And last year, Prime Minister Trudeau included Newfoundland and Labrador in an apology for residential schools. That's just a partial list. And on November 7th, the Government of Canada will apologize to the Jewish community for turning away refugees, as we suggested, on the St. Louis in 1939. Rabbi, to you first. What is the significance of that apology in your view?
Well, I presume the timing is very significant. It comes 2 days before Kristallnacht, 80 years ago in 1938, the evening of November 9 and 10, when the Jewish community in Germany was sacked. 100 people or maybe more were killed. 30,000 Jews were imprisoned. Many hospitals, synagogues, homes, Jewish businesses sacked.
Kristallnacht meaning the night of broken glass.
The night of broken glass, exactly. So I presume that the apology, which the Prime Minister will offer, will coincide with that event, which will make it timely and resonant. Beyond that, look, the Jews are like every other group today. Identity politics rules us to a degree. Some would say too much, some would say not enough. And therefore, this is the Jewish community's chance to also be acknowledged for the wounds that were ignored, in fact, by the Canadian government 80 years ago.
Does it mean something to you personally?
No. No, it doesn't.
Why not?
I should say, I know it means a lot to Jews, to other Jews, and especially to people whose families were on the St. Louis and were affected. None of my family was affected. My larger family, to be sure, the Jews were affected. It's 80 years ago. I'm happy if the Prime Minister is genuine about his apology, which I suspect he will be, and then I'm happy to move on.
Jonathan Kay, does it resonate with you at all?
It doesn't. I think that the best way that a country could apologize, to the extent it has to apologize, is by building an inclusive society. Canada is, in my opinion, among the least anti-Semitic nations on the face of the planet. It's an amazing place to be Jewish, and I think that is better than any apology. I also just don't think nations or corporations they're institutional. They don't feel human emotions. When you apologize to somebody, to the extent that it's genuine, that's something a human feels. Mitt Romney got in trouble on the presidential hustings when he said that corporations are persons. Corporations aren't people in the sense that they don't feel emotions. Nations don't feel emotions. And so to say sorry for decisions that were made by people who are long dead, it's meaningless to me, and it seems like a political stunt.
Let's follow up on that. What would you say are the elements of a genuine, meaningful apology?
Well, a genuine, meaningful apology has got to acknowledge all of the facts, acknowledge exactly what happened, acknowledge who was responsible for the wrongdoing, take responsibility for that wrongdoing, promise never to do it again. When you apologize, as Trudeau will, as a representative of a corporate entity, then the assumption is you aren't feeling personally responsible. You're not, but you represent that corporate entity, and you represent it ethically and morally, just the way you have to pay the corporate entity's debts. You also have to make sure it's set up right. You have to have a proper ceremonial venue. You have to negotiate with people ahead of time what you're going to say. All of these things come into it.
So in your view, it can be a useful and meaningful thing to do?
I have no idea whether this particular apology will be meaningful. In a way, it's a stand-in for the past anti-Semitic behavior in Canada. So it's a stand-in for all Jews who were denied entry to Canada, not just the ones in the St. Louis. It's a stand-in for social anti-Semitism. It's a stand-in for Jewish quotas in universities until the 60s. So you might see it that way. What you take is one little incident, and it won't ever happen again. So it doesn't really matter, as opposed to apologizing for the residential schools, but not apologizing for mass incarceration of Indigenous people, not apologizing for lousy water supplies, not apologizing for terrible schools. You can't apologize for that because you can't promise you'll never do it again.
That leads me nicely to the chief here. You remember well the day when Stephen Harper apologized for the residential schools.
I do.
Was that meaningful to you?
I recall the day, actually. I was driving to go visit family, and I was on the 401, and I heard it come on the radio, and I thought, I have to get off the highway. I have to pull over so I can really focus and engage on what's being said. And I remember feeling very happy and proud that this was being acknowledged finally. I was also skeptical because I'm not, my political stripe is not conservative, so I was naturally wondering why they were choosing to do this, but I took it at face value.
You did take it at face value.
And I was glad because I saw it as a tool for public education and awareness. I felt that a lot of Canadians had no idea about residential schools. They still don't, and hence why we need to teach it in schools. But I was pleased. After the apology, that's when the real truth came to light, I think, whether they were going to walk the walk or whatever that saying is. And in my view, they didn't.
But the initial, let's say reconciliation is this distance. After the apology came, did it look more like that to you?
They couched the apology as a component part of reconciliation. I feel that it's true. It is part of reconciliation to recognize something and apologize for it. But I felt like in reading the apology and afterwards, after I took that time to listen to it, it was very narrow in scope. It had to do with residential schools, which was extremely important to apologize for obvious reasons. But it wasn't creating an apology for a colonial past. It didn't acknowledge the fulsomeness or the context. And I felt that could be seen as political stunt making if you weren't careful, if you were trying to steer a conversation or steer the scope of it. And so we've seen from the outfall or the fallout of the apology with their treatment of the lack of implementation of the Kelowna Accord exactly where their apology was headed.
Ronaldo, let me get your take on whether you think public apologies by governments for past deeds matter.
I think they matter. I don't think they matter as much as we want them to matter. And I don't think they matter as much as we want them to matter because the apologies come at a moment where the nation state, the representative of the people, the government, is able to say exactly when and how they're going to circumscribe what that apology is. So it keeps the nation state intact. It keeps the nation state not transforming from the initial injury that it had rendered. And so the apologies are an excuse for the nation state to say, look, we have somehow progressed, we have somehow moved into a state of better being without fully acknowledging that the injury that was caused has not actually been fully dealt with. And so apologies are really sleight of hand, they're double-sided. Of course, the communities that organized to receive these apologies, the apologies become deeply meaningful to them. But the apologies actually hold state power in place and helps to further legitimize state power. And in particular, if necessary, to re-injure again and to actually continue with particular kinds of injury.
If it's seen as sincere by the group that it is designed to ameliorate, is that enough?
No, it's not enough. In settler colonies like Canada, these kinds of apologies circumscribe exactly how the nation comes to be. So for Indigenous people, we get an apology for residential schools, not an apology for the violence that created Canada. We've not really received any apologies for Canada's role in transatlantic slavery, and so on. We look at the Kamagata rule, we look at Japanese internment. All of these apologies circumscribe and play into a narrative of Canada being a benevolent place. But we know that there are other violences that continue to underwrite the story of what Canada is.
Well, the current Prime Minister's father, when he was Prime Minister, famously declined to apologize and offer these similar kinds of statements. He said, I do not, this is Pierre Trudeau obviously, I do not think the purpose of a government is to write the past. It cannot rewrite history. It is our purpose to be just in our time. Agree or disagree, Rabbi?
Well, I think the larger matter is that in this case, the apple falls far from the tree. Pierre Trudeau was somewhat autocratic. Justin Trudeau is, as the feminists would say, relational. One is not like the other, at least in this sense. We also, this is now 40 years later, it's a different time. I think governments have to make a sincere effort toward an apology. Ronaldo is right, it doesn't change the past, but it can change the present. And reconciliation, there's a wonderful saying in the Talmud which says, Masha yotzim min halev niknasim el halev.
We're not great on our Hebrew
What
here.
emanates from my heart, if it's genuine, if it enters Ronaldo's heart, it will touch him, if it's genuine on my part. I think the Prime Minister, even though it's a political stunt perhaps, I think he's genuine about it. I hope he will do serious study. In other words, not just read a press release, but read books. After all, he announced this in May. I hope he reads books. I hope he talks to people. I hope he spends at least a dozen hours thinking about it. If he does, you'll see it in the apology.
John?
I don't think his own personal sincerity comes into play for reasons that Professor Walcott identified, which is the lawyerly nature of apologies that come from nations or corporations. You know that whatever apology we get in November, a dozen lawyers will have seen it. When Union Carbide apologized for what happened at Bhopal, a whole team of lawyers looked at it, and you can tell, like if you look at it, it is narrowly circumscribed. And it has to be narrowly circumscribed because these are essentially corporate entities. The most sincere apology that we deliver in our personal lives tend to be spontaneous. Someone confronts you with something, did you steal a cookie? Oh my God, yes, I'm sorry, I stole the cookie. I wish I could give you the cookie back, but I ate the cookie. If you wait a week and then you give a lawyerly, I don't know what happened to the cookie, but things happened to the cookie and I regret what happened to the cookie. Of course, it's not worth anything. And no matter how sincere Justin Trudeau is, and he probably is sincere and he probably is well read on the subject, what we get in November will have a whole team of lawyers will have gone through it, and it'll destroy the emotional force of it because nations don't feel emotions, humans do. That's why the whole concept is silly.
Rhoda?
I think this is going to be a very easy apology for two reasons. One is that the Jewish community will accept it, and the Jewish community is not a threat in Canada. This is not Serbia and Croatia apologizing to each other. You don't have to worry that, if you're Croatian and you say the wrong thing to a Serb, the war will start again. The Jewish community is well established here and will accept it. The other reason is the Jewish community is not asking for financial reparations. Most apologies include reparations either to the individuals or to the collectivity. No, unless they're planning on something like the Japanese apology, when a certain amount of money went to establish educational type institutions. My suspicion is that this emerges from the Jewish community. There's no bigger political problem here. In many other cases, there are huge political problems if there's no apology.
When Brian Mulroney did the apology 30 years ago, it was considered, if my memory serves me, pretty extraordinary because apologies of this type were so rare. They are not so rare anymore.
He did it after Ronald Reagan did the apology in the States, and Canadians got almost exactly the same amount of money as Japanese Americans got. Again, this was a fairly easy one. It was a discrete kind of thing. You have a known wrongdoer. You have known victims. It's for a short period of time. This is not like African Americans. It was 5 years.
But what I'm getting at is, given that they're not so rare anymore,
Yeah.
are they therefore less special, less extraordinary?
They're less extraordinary. If they're special, it's going to depend on whether or not there's actual reparations or whether it's just nonsense.
But moral currency is like any other form of currency. If you print more, it becomes worth less.
Worth less.
So yeah, there is a sort of contrition inflation going on. And you actually saw that when this apology was announced a few months ago. You actually saw it. Remember, there was a National Post piece, and I forget who wrote it. It basically said, hey, it's our turn, everyone else got an apology, which is like the worst possible reason to give an apology.
Very cynical.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was sort of right there in black and white. And yeah, I think the more apologies you give, the less meaning it has.
Ronaldo.
Even though everyone has not received an apology, right? The black Oklahomans who were turned back and deemed unsuitable to enter Canada at the turn of the 20th century have never received an apology, and their descendants who continue to, some of their descendants who continue to live in the prairies have not received an apology for Canada's wrongdoings. And when we put 1911 together with 2018, and we know what's happening at the borders of Quebec, where again, Haitian refugees, black refugees are being deemed unsuitable, where this Prime Minister's government has dispatched envoys to Miami and New York to tell Haitians not to come to Canada to seek refuge. We know, we see the underpinnings of what these apologies are supposed to do, which these apologies are supposed to blind us to ongoing injustice, and the ways in which, you know, the underpinnings of the nation itself, the underpinnings of the nation state are violently riven. And so while I'm not a proponent of apologies, even though I am a proponent for redress and reparation, and for the undoing of the violence that has produced wealth for some and not for others.
Let me follow up on that, Ronaldo, if I can, because we heard the issue of slavery brought up a few moments ago. Now, clearly, Canada did not, thankfully, Canada did not have an experience with slavery in the way that the United States did. Having said that, we did have it. Would you like to see some kind of official apology with reparations?
I would like to see some reparations. I'm not so much interested in the apology, but I think it's really important that we understand that it's not necessary to compare the kind of slavery that happened in Canada to what happened in the US, south of the border, but we also have to understand that the entity that we now call Canada, this thing that we call Canada, its practice of slavery extended well beyond its borders, right? I come to you via Barbados. You know, we grew up eating salted cod. Canada, this thing that we call Canada, it's built out of its long ongoing and duration of relations to transatlantic slavery. So yes, reparations necessary.
But not an apology?
I'm not interested in apologies because apologies are performative. They're supposed to make you feel good in a particular kind of way. I'm interested in us acknowledging the underpinnings of the nation state and what nation states do, which is modern nation states, post-Columbus, post-European Enlightenment, are founded on tremendous acts of violence.
So for politicians, that's the worst of both worlds. That's, you don't get the performative, theatrical, feel-good aspect of it, and you have to spend money. Like, you'll never see that because it's literally the worst of both worlds for a political figure, especially since someone like Trudeau, he's a brand manager. He's the brand manager of Canada. So it's one thing to say, wow, we really screwed up our product 50 or 100 years ago. It's a completely different thing to say we've been screwing up our product till now, including under my government. So you'd never hear that. And that's why the idea of apologizing for something ongoing, like the situation for Indigenous peoples or refugee policy, that's completely unrealistic because it's just shooting yourself in the foot politically, right?
Rhoda.
He claims to be the, sorry.
No, please, go ahead.
He claims to be the purveyor of all things reconciliation, so it's time. It's time for him to give context to that.
Does context mean money?
Absolutely. Well, I think yes.
So the apology for the residential schools was good as far as it went, but you would like to see some land claim
Absolutely.
settlements?
It fell short. It fell short because they actually went against what the apology was claiming it would do. But I feel like any apology, we teach our kids to apologize because of psychological benefit that comes out of it. Why not? Why wouldn't you want that for your community, Professor Walkup? I mean, that, to me, that is the first glimmer of hope. And then you wait and see, is there proof in this apology? Are they going to atone? Are they going to make better what they say they need to make better? And in the context of Indigenous people, yes, that's money, and for programs and services, clean water. They apologize for residential schools, yet we are the most represented group in the CAS system right now. That's the new residential
Children's
school.
Aid.
in the children's aid. So what are you going to do to live up to that apology? And I think that apology gives us a reference point to look back to and say, hey, wait a minute, you didn't live up to what you said you were going to.
But I think if
an apology is one thing, reconciliation is another. Notwithstanding the truth of what Professor Walcott has said, the Prime Minister will never acknowledge violence in the roots of Canada, for the reason that Jonathan Kay has just suggested. This is a brand, and Canada is a classical liberal society, more or less, a democratic society. By definition, it cannot look closely at any roots that have to do with violence. It just will not happen. Maybe with a revolution, but before that, it won't happen in any classical liberal society.
But those of us who have a utopian, those of us who have a utopian
the
view-
normal female thing. Yeah, I
Huh?
wanted to point out another group that the government has not apologized to and will not apologize to is poor people. Right? We have all sorts of identity groups in Canada. Indigenous people and people of African descent tend to be much slower on the economic hierarchy than others. But there are a lot of poor people out there who are white, heterosexual, male, Christian background, whatever. They're unemployable, they're not educated, they're depressed, whatever. They're poor. There are a lot of people, women, who are poor. We're never going to apologize to those people. We're not going to apologize for the inadequate welfare payments we give them, the way we treat them when they're disabled, because this is systemic. It is not just a nation state, this is a capitalist society. And those people are suffering far more than somebody whose ancestor didn't get here on the St. Louis in 1939.
But you would...
Professor
Go ahead,
Hasselman, that's
Douglas.
exactly the point that I'm making, right? That those of us who have a radical utopian democratic view of how we might be able to live together better in the future, understand that apologies that maintain the status quo of how the nation understands itself and decides to proceed are a problem. That in fact if we want apologies that are riven with significant reparations, redress, and so on, that begins to unmake the violence that has made the nation and move it somewhere else. Our inability to offer those kinds of apologies means that all we're doing is giving power to the state in the representation of governments to simply continue as before. Now we can say we've put that behind us. Now Ronaldo should stop whining. Now Ronaldo should not ask for reparations for poor Black Nova Scotians. Now Ronaldo should not ask for reparations for the descendants of those who live in Grey County. Now, you get what I'm saying? It's exactly that kind of moral, ethical challenge to how it is we understand ourselves as citizens of something called Canada that is at the stake of what apology should mean.
So what do we do about that?
I think that some apologies are meaningful for some groups of people. And it's better than not apologizing. I think our current Prime Minister is sincere in his beliefs that he should apologize. The apology to the LGBT community for having been thrown out of the military and the civil service after we got our Constitution, our Charter of Rights, I think is very important, and those people deserve to be compensated. So there are cases when it's fairly recent and people have had severe financial losses and they deserve compensation.
They are negotiating that as we speak.
There are other cases, like the African-Canadian community, where you have all sorts of different people who came in, people who were enslaved up to 1833, people who escaped slavery from the US, people who have come in as immigrants since immigration was opened up. It's a very big community. So to whom do you apologize? Well, you could apologize for discrete events, some of which Ronaldo has suggested, and you could establish a fund, right? A big comprehensive fund, perhaps an educational fund or a medical fund, once you negotiated with representatives of the community. That would be a lot more meaningful than just saying, gee, we're sorry Canada took slaves until 1833.
John.
Germany paid billions of dollars.
60 billion.
Yeah.
And counting.
Now, I didn't get any of that money. My family didn't, nor should we, of Jewish roots. But the greatest thing Germany did was build a liberal democratic society that stands as a living testament to the values and the lessons learned from the Holocaust. The money created a lot of fighting. It created a lot of resentment. It enriched some people in some cases. In other cases, there were people whose families suffered horrible losses who got money. I think ultimately the money ended up being immaterial, and what was meaningful was the society that Germany created out of the ashes of the monstrous Nazi regime. And I think likewise in Canada, what would mean more for LGBT community, for Indigenous community, is the creation of a society where everybody is valued. Now, I think compared to Professor Walcott, we have maybe a different view of what that society should look like. But I completely agree. I completely agree that the proof is in the kind of society you create and not in the photo ops where you say sorry in language that a team of lawyers has created for you.
If I may add
Please.
to what Jonathan has said, I want to say that as a Jew, Berlin is one of my favorite cities. And the reason is the entire history of contemporary Berlin, at least going back 150 years, is available to you. So you see pre-Weimar Berlin, you see Weimar Berlin, you see Nazi Berlin, you see post-Nazi Berlin. And so it's all there in the architecture, and nothing has been pretended away. That is a powerful statement, and I think it's consistent with what you've said about liberal democratic society in Germany today.
So let me understand.
Berlin is also one of my favorite cities in the world too, but we can't romanticize contemporary Berlin either, where violence against African and Muslim immigrants is happening.
I didn't say I was
I
romanticizing
know
it.
you didn't, but I want to add that to the conversation because what that does is it elongates the history of violence that has been at play in Berlin. But I want to say that in places like Canada, the problem of talking about it as the nature of what kind of society we will build, we can't get there until we deal with the original violence. Indigenous people are still with us. Indigenous people are still experiencing the long jury of that original violence. Black people are still experiencing the long jury of the lodges of transatlantic slavery in this place we call Canada.
So does that mean save your apology and talk turkey?
No, save your apology and let's talk about how we're going to build a radically different society. Because what the apologies do is they keep in place those who are connected to that long history of violence, living out the advantage of that violence.
Is that how you interpreted or inferred the Harper apology?
I want both. I want the apology to start a dialogue. That's all I'm saying. It's starting a dialogue. It's raising awareness from our politicians, our brand managers who create a dialogue within this large place we call Canada. That's all I want. And then talk turkey. Turkey is needed in order for the apology to be meaningful. But I understand what you're saying. It solidifies the conversation in such a way that may not be beneficial.
And I just refuse to acknowledge nations as corporate entities. Nations are something more than corporate entities.
Absolutely.
I want to ask Rhoda about women. Should there be an apology to the women of Canada, given the fact that women got the vote much later than men? Women in the province of Quebec got the vote much later than women in other provinces. Indigenous women couldn't vote in elections in this country until 1960. I mean, I think most of us were born well, maybe not all of us, but some of us were born here in 1960. Is that something that women are entitled to an apology from?
Well, again, what's the point? I mean, yes, you can apologize for a long list of things, and it's not just the vote, it's deprivation of property, deprivation of the right to have custody of your own children, physical abuse in the home, sexual abuse, all those things. But again, what's going to happen, that is not all caused by the state. Some of it is. Some of it is social or economic. So the government is only going to apologize for that for which it is personally responsible as a corporate and directly responsible. So then, delaying the vote might be an example of that. I don't know whether that would, whether women would care about this. I think women are probably much more concerned about whether or not our officials take violence against women seriously. There was a backlash in England when Tony Blair expressed regret for the slave trade, not apology, because apology implied legal responsibility. A lot of people said, hey, my ancestors aren't responsible for that.
You were content to take the apology for residential schools as an Indigenous person. Would you want an apology as a woman for the sins of the country?
I was content to accept the apology as the start of dialogue.
Correct. Yeah.
And excited about that. So if the government said, we apologize for the violent treatment against women for all of these various reasons and ways that it's played out over time, and the scope was appropriate, then I would say, great, let's start a dialogue here. Finally, somebody is recognizing that women in all socioeconomic backgrounds are suffering. And of course, I have a particular concern with murdered and missing Indigenous women, and I think it's deplorable how the inquiry's gone. But again, I would accept it for what it is and move forward.
If I might say,
Please.
I think, woman is not, I have to put on my women's studies and women's gender studies hat as the director of such a program. Woman is not a unified category. It's not a single category. And so what would that apology mean? How would we exonerate the white women who oppress Black and Indigenous women and other women of color? So that's a tricky one, but it's an interesting one. And that's what I mean, that the politics of the apology without an attendant deep redress and recounting of how we got there in the first instance, it's meaningless. It doesn't mean that those who want it don't feel an effective relationship to having that apology. But if we're not going to then collectively think about how that injury came to be in the first instance and do the deep work to repair that injury, it's a useless apology. So for instance, we can apologize to women as some imagined singular category, and then we go out and sexual assault and abuse still continues. What use then is that apology if men and masculinities and boys are not taught to be different in the face of it?
What would really happen is the kind of thing that's happened in the States, where you have apologies again for discrete instances. For example, Bill Clinton apologized for the Tuskegee experiments where African-American men with syphilis were not treated in order to see how the disease went. And there have been other kinds of discrete incidents, like in Oklahoma, Rosewood in Florida, where there are apologies. You don't have a great, big, huge apology to all African Americans, even though in the United States, much of what has happened to African Americans is a result of deliberate government policy through slavery, Jim Crow, and so on. So you'd have to find some kind of really offensive, discrete kind of thing that represents for women. The easy one is violence against women. All women, no matter what their race, ethnicity, and so on, are subject to violence against women. Violence against women has been the international unifying force in the women's movement. So you could do something like apologize for the fact that police forces did not take it seriously until very recently, if they do at all now. But again, to get to Professor Walcott's point, not all white women oppress Indigenous and African American women, right? There are women out there who are extremely poor, who are living on the margins, whose identity may say, I am privileged, but whose actual life experience show that they are extremely disprivileged.
Professor Hassman, with all due respect, your response to my comment is similar to when men say, not all men, right? The point is not that all white women oppress Black and Indigenous women. And you keep using the term African American, but we're here in Canada. We refer to people as African Canadian, but I'm talking about here. That's the point I'm making, right? So the point is not so much to suggest, it's a generalization of a particular situation, a situation where we know racial hierarchy does exist and continues to exist and is meaningful and impacts the everyday lives of people.
I think sometimes apologies can actually make things worse. And the reason they can make things worse is when people apologize, you say to yourself, I want to make things the way they were before the evil was done. And sometimes that can create a romantic or sentimental idea of turning back the clock in a way that isn't necessarily healthy for the people to whom you want to apologize. And I think in the case of Indigenous peoples in Canada, I know a lot of white settler people like myself who have actually adopted extremely unproductive, sentimental, romanticized ideas about just how wonderful Canada was if we hadn't have done residential schools. And they sort of have these Rousseauian fantasies of the noble savage, and they say, and that guides policy And that's animated by a climate of apology where you say, oh, we're going to turn back the clock, we're going to get rid of this evil, and then you implement policies which are actually anachronistic and dumb, and I think it can make apologies, as I say, not just useless, but actually negative in their effect.
Look, something's missing in our conversation, which is human beings are not perfectible. Society is not perfectible. Evil has been with us from the beginning of time, and it always will be, regardless of policies. So I love your utopian vision, but it goes against the nature of the world and the nature of the human being. It won't happen. So the question is, what can we do to close that gap? One of the things that we can do is to understand the nature of evil. In this regard, the Prime Minister's apology coming up next month will be very important. He will understand, I think, that the turning away of the St. Louis was actually an evil act. If you acknowledge it, you make recompense, and I don't mean financial recompense, emotional recompense, and you design policies so it doesn't happen again, you've gone a long way.
Chief LaRocca.
Yeah, to that point, we know evil exists everywhere and it's out there, but why not try and remain hopeful and strive for an ideal that we may never achieve? An apology is an ideal. I think it's part of starting a discussion in the ideal of a free and democratic society, which is being promoted here, and we all want that, but how can we start the conversation if we don't look back and say, what is just? Hang on a minute, maybe there are some things we should be sorry for. So let's think about what we might want to apologize for. I think it's just the beginning of a conversation, and I think you're right. Part of walking the walk or showing recompense is policy making in addition to, or even maybe separate and apart from financial reparations, depending on the issue. I don't think it's all about the money, but policy is a huge part of it. But I like to think that we give people a reason to create dialogue and keep talking. After all, why are we here if we're not keeping apologizing? I don't know.
We are grateful to all five of you for helping start that conversation, or at least continue it, here on TVO Tonight. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.